Hey, I am David for Big Bits, and in this video we are going to be taking a look at a little update from the Pine team and looking at their latest update to some Pine functions, which expands upon the functionality. We'll get into that in just a moment, and also we're going to take a look at some TA. Of course, there's been some big news. I don't really get to do my TA videos as often as I'd like anymore, so we're going to dive into that just a little bit as well. But of course, if you are looking for your paid subscription to TradingView for all the other features that they offer, go ahead and check out the description of the video. You can get $30 towards your subscription. Also helps me out just a little bit. But right now, we are going to go ahead and take a look at what they've done. Now, there's two things here, and if you have followed me for a while, you'll know that you should also be following the Pinecoder Squawk Box. This is their Telegram account that has updates that come out, and not all of these are included in the What's New section on the TradingView website. So if you click on the menu there and you click on What's New, you'll get a lot of updates about Pine come through here through their blog. But what you're not going to see are some of these other updates, such as this one, where they talk about the security function, which we've covered a lot in some of our videos before, where they have basically clarified some things about how it should work and things you should avoid to do with the security function. I'm not going to dive into that. That's pretty detailed. And honestly, most people who are watching my channel don't really need to dive in that deeply. I think the other videos that I've done for you should handle that pretty well. But what we are going to take a look at, and this is pretty simple, is just some more functions have been added to support the dynamic length arguments. Now I'm going to pull up this blog post that they have. And it said they started doing this last September, and they've expanded the list even further for more of these particular built-in functions. Now, if you aren't familiar, the built-in functions are functions that already exist within the Pine language that allow you to go ahead and calculate certain indicators without you having to manually create those calculations within your code. So you don't have to create the Bollinger Band calculations within your application. You can just call the Bollinger Band function and pass in the right arguments, and you'll get the Bollinger Band results. So that's something to keep an eye on here. But if you're also not familiar with what it means by saying dynamic length, this just means that you can adjust the length used for the look back period on your calculations. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. We're going to take a look at this little bit of code down here. I'm not going to go into detail on exactly what's going on, but essentially what they are doing is they are keeping track of how many bars it's been since they've started looking back. So every new candle, they add another one to their look back period. That way they're looking back from the same point in time. It might be a little bit confusing, but I can show you what that example that they gave you here. You can see they start their look back period here, and then they have to add an extra number to this every candle so they can continue to look back from the same point. So that's what they're doing. Now, in the past, you couldn't really do this because the dynamic input for the length for the look back period wasn't available. You would have to use a constant value. So if you wanted to use a 20 period look back, that's all you could do. You couldn't change that 20 period look back halfway through. So you can see they had a look back period here, and you can see this range, but then it changes. That's what makes it dynamic, of course. So that's just something to keep an eye on here. Let me pull up that code again. They're doing this, and they have the bars since start, and they are going to be using this towards their look back period and also for their standard deviations, other things that they're doing here. I'm not really paying attention to the code too much. The main thing that you're doing here is just paying attention to what they're actually doing with these functions and adding in the support for the dynamic length. And if you're curious about all that, I do believe I covered this a little bit more in detail when they first announced this for support on some of their functions. Now they've just added this to more of their functions. So it's pretty simple. Quick update here on what's going on. But what's really important here lately is Bitcoin and Ethereum. And I don't really get to make the crypto news type videos like I used to. I was added another class this semester, so I'm again teaching 2 classes. So my time is constrained much more than I expected. I wanted to get back into that, but I'll probably be able to do that this summer. But anyways, the news yesterday of Elon Musk buying, well, not Elon, but him instructing Tesla to purchase $1.5 billion worth of Bitcoin made the market jump up incredibly high within one day. It was a huge percentage move, even on the logarithmic chart. It stands out as one of the biggest moves daily in a very, very long time. And you can see our trends are still looking really good. And it looks like we have just started another upwards trend in this bigger trend. You can see the 20-day moving average here in the Bollinger Bands. That is the white line here. Let me zoom in just a little bit. You might be able to see that a little bit better. That is our 20-period moving average. And you see it just started turning up, and it looks to do nothing but continue to move up. And again, what I like to show you with these forecast values is we are removing these old values and just replacing it with the current price value. And this is what is expected if the price stays flat. And it should still continue to move up even if the price starts to correct down. Just because you're going to be replacing these values on the back end with higher values up here. The price is going to have to plummet to around 30,000 to prevent this trend from going up in the next few days. So it does look like things have started to take off again. We are riding those upper bands again, which you can see once that starts, it might slow down for a while, but it's very likely to continue riding these bands for a period of time. Let's go back. You can see started back here, rode up for a very long time. We didn't touch the daily Bollinger Band, the middle band, in a very long time. That's like a month and a half of time there. Got about a month there. So there's a long period of time where we haven't even traded close to, and well, really we've traded much closer to the upper band. And that's something to keep an eye out for. My indicators. If you'd follow me on Twitter, I don't post a whole lot, but I did mention, let me zoom in here. Around this point, I had mentioned that our momentum on the RSI was starting to change. And this is why I use the smoothed RSI indicator. You can also kind of take a look at this as if it were a resistance line, a diagonal resistance on the RSI. Some people do that. I don't. I prefer to watch those moving averages move and change. So you could see there was a pretty good dip. We were coming back to a neutral area. The RSI jumped up for a day or two. It looked very likely that we were going to get a trend change at that point. I called that out there. Plus, my indicator that I created, the Stochastic Weights Advanced, showed that we had already actually started that. So in combination with our lower end crossover here and our smooth RSI starting to turn up, it looked pretty good for a momentum change. And again, I don't get to post as many videos as I like, as much as a lot of other YouTubers do. So if you don't follow me on Twitter, you might want to go ahead and do that. Because I do post these things from time to time. And what's crazy is, of course, you couldn't anticipate the news from Elon on that particular day, but you'll go back and you'll notice we spotted the trend change here around when we were hitting resistance on that Bollinger Band. So even though we were hitting that Bollinger Band, I was pretty confident we were going to move back up above it. We did. That ended up being a good call. Not all of them are, obviously. No one is perfect here. But we've flipped everything to look bullish, and it continues to look very bullish for the time being on Bitcoin. The MACD pointed straight up, RSI trending up, the Stochastic Weights Advanced trending up. Everything looks really good right now. I suspect we're going to ride those upper Bollinger Bands for a while and break 50,000, hopefully sometime later this week. And of course, there's no way to tell for sure. But things are looking really good on Bitcoin. I want to go ahead and switch over to the weekly chart for Bitcoin. And let's take a look at what we got here. Let's zoom in. And the weekly chart is a little bit more interesting. It paints a much more bullish picture, in my opinion, based on my experience with my indicator. And that is when we have this downward movement, and yet the trend continues upward at a very high pace, you'll likely get another crossover, but afterwards we can end up usually expecting a bearish divergence, which means that it'll cross over somewhere down here in the coming weeks, and come up and form some sort of divergence before it comes down for a while. Now, what I'm kind of looking at right now is the fact that we have not tested the mid band on the weekly chart since October of last year, the very beginning of October of last year, to be more specific. If things continue in this bullish trend and do form this potential bearish divergence, we could see the price continue to shoot up rapidly. Still, rapidly shoot up. I'm not going to try and call a top. I was pretty conservative before the bull run that, I was thinking, 60, maybe $70,000 at the top. I was admittedly much more conservative than most people. But I think in this run alone, we can get to 60, 70, maybe even higher. I'm not ruling out 100K on this first big impulse on the bull market. It's hard to imagine. But with the news from Tesla, if we can get some of these other companies to kind of FOMO in on that type of news and act similarly, there's no telling what can actually happen here. They are going to feel like they've missed the boat. And one other thing that the Elon news made me think of was, well, after this bull cycle, where are we going to bottom out at? Because going back to 2017, get that out of the way, we broke the all-time highs. Let's see, where was that? I've got to get the Bollinger Band off, unfortunately, so we can kind of see what's going on a little bit better on the log chart. We broke the all-time highs back around in this period in, what was it, March or February of 2017. But the all-time highs were around 1,200 or so. And our first big pullback was to 1,900. Our first kind of top there was 3,000, which turned out to be pretty much the bottom of the next bear market. You can see where that kind of lines up nicely here. So where will our lowest part of our next bear market happen? I would almost be willing to bet that we can hold somewhere within this range, mainly because this is the first multi-week stop or consolidation within this bull cycle, and secondly, because I don't think Tesla's going to lose on their Bitcoin position. I don't think they're going to go down. If it does pull back below there, it probably won't for a while. It'll probably be one of those scenarios where we get a big bottom wick and gets bought up quickly. And as the weeks are moving on, you can see how quickly that mid band is coming up here. And pretty soon, here in 4 to 5 weeks, which is a month, it's going to be above 30,000. And if it holds support like it did in previous markets, that's a very good sign. And again, I can't possibly predict the top on the cycle, but one thing I am looking at least for the short term, which may signal this market may be entirely different, and we only do get the one run up. But you'll notice this kind of double dip on the bottom of the Bollinger Bands, and you'll notice this at the end of these parabolic moves. It's a little bit harder to show you on the 2017 one, but you notice we had that kind of parabolic run up in 19, I believe. We had that parabolic run up, and we had this kind of trough here where it dropped drastically below. No, it's not below zero yet, but it dropped very low on the weekly chart, and then it came back up, and then it did it again. And you'll notice a similar pattern here where we've dropped down very quickly, very low. It's come back up, and the reason I expect price to continue to go up is because of how it's acted in the past. Let's go back to the top on 2017. This one's somewhat similar, except it maintained that lower region. It never did come back up at any point. It was very much peak euphoria. You had the multiple weeks with the Bollinger Band extremely extended below zero during that time. So I'm really taking a look to see when we might peak on the bottom Bollinger Band and look for a potential top. If it's not the cycle top, at least a short-term top. We'll get a better picture of what's going on later on. don't think anyone's going to be able to tell you where this top's going to be. There are measured moves out there based on technical patterns, and I don't really trust any of it. The news cycle this time around is a little bit different. And again, if we get those companies buying in like Tesla, it's hard to say how things are going to shape out. You'll notice back on 2017 here on Ethereum, the chart was very similar with the Bollinger Band extended below and stayed below for some time. Take a look at where we are now, doing pretty much the same thing, except we've only just now broken the all-time highs over the past month, and I think there's a lot more room to grow. Similar to Bitcoin, it has started its downward movement here on the stochastic advanced. The MACD is still very bullish. The RSI is still very high. These things can stay overextended for a very long period of time. I'm not going to think about betting against Ethereum when it's just broken its all-time highs and it's still relatively close. You take a look at Bitcoin, it is nearly 2.5 times its previous all-time highs, where Ethereum is maybe 20-30% above its previous all-time highs. So I'm not in any hurry to look to get out of any position long-term on Ethereum. Take a look at the daily chart on Ethereum, very similar to the Bitcoin chart. It has held up rather well, and this is another one of those things that I mentioned on my Twitter account, is that it held up better than Bitcoin during this consolidation period. In fact, it formed this sort of ascending wedge that a lot of people thought could break down, as they typically do. But if you're an experienced trader from crypto over the past, many years, at least going back to 2017, during that bull run, you would have known that a lot of times during these bull periods that these will break up. And considering we had just broken the all-time highs, it seemed very likely that it was going to break up, which isn't the most common resolution for these sorts of ascending wedges, but it is what happened. It's just something to keep an eye on. You'll notice our RSI trend has started moving back up. Of course, my head is in the way on that one, but you'll notice our RSI trend, zoom in, is moving back up slowly here. We had the cross down here, but the price is still moving up. So again, I talked about this earlier on the stochastic weights advance. If the price is moving up, but you've got this downward movement, you're very likely to have another cross back up. And I can continue, I can see Ethereum continuing to move upwards in price for at least a month to two, if that were to stay the way it is. And also, of course, the MACD is positive. That looks really great. And I did say a month or two. I meant a few weeks because I forgot I was on the daily chart and not the weekly. So you could imagine a couple of weeks of positive movement, some very good positive movement on Ethereum, just because of the way things are trending. So looks like a potential positive trend where things can move up even quicker than it already has. Kind of hard to believe at times, but that is what the indicators are kind of telling me right now. I don't want to dig too far into these things. I did want to take a look at Doge. I am not a fan of what's going on with Doge. Granted, I did, quote, miss the boat on Doge, but I've never been interested in owning Doge. I'm definitely not going to want to own Doge at these prices. What's going on is you are seeing people taking the Wall Street bet thing, and they are just going all in on Doge as their cryptocurrency. It is not the best cryptocurrency to do this with. If they would just take that same energy and apply it to Bitcoin, they would be much better off. Mainly because if you don't know, Doge has a unlimited supply. Now, granted, it's growing at a percentage slower than you might expect. They have about 128 billion coins out right now, and it grows by about 5 billion each year. So it's kind of diluting the market here just a little bit. But on the daily chart, of course, that looks great. I mean, it could continue up. It might even hit that $1 this year. But one thing's for sure, I don't want to be the sucker holding the bag when we come back down. And I'll show you why. And this might work when you're trading against the dollar. And this doesn't even go back as far as I'd like. Trading and winning versus the dollar might work for those of you who got into Doge. This is the Poloniex chart. As you can see, it traded very, very cheaply. Let's see, that is a percentage of a penny, 1 or 2% of a penny back here. Then it exploded. It did it again. Not to say that this won't happen again, but it's definitely one of those that kind of struggled once it got up there and went completely sideways for a very long time. There was a few nice little bumps in the road here where you were able to take some profit. But what you really want to notice when you're looking at Doge is how you're going to perform versus Bitcoin. And this is, again, the wrong chart. Let me find the Poloniex chart since it goes back further. Take a look at this chart. You can see those nice run-ups versus Bitcoin, and it's in one of those right now. But what you're looking at right now for Doge is it's nearing its all-time highs versus Bitcoin. And that was when it was first listed. Could it break those and move up? Sure. But I'm not going to, like I said, I'm not going to be the one who takes that risk. Again, what you're seeing right now is this kind of social media memeing into life of the price action on Doge, and it's working. But you also saw this same kind of price action on GameStop, and you saw how that turned out. And not that this market was going to act the same. I think Doge can hold up a little bit better than GameStop, honestly. But what you're seeing is very similar. You know, the price shot up literally out of nowhere to unreasonable amounts considering where it was, and it came crashing back down. You don't want to be the person who bought into the hype and that news cycle that was everywhere and bought up at the top. You never know if these prices are going to come back up on GameStop back to the top where they were. It's going to be very hard for you to get those prices again and to be able to get out of your position in profit. And it's just not something that I am willing to consider getting into when you compare GameStop to Doge. And again, I think Doge will hold up better than GameStop in the long run. I think GameStop's a little outdated model. There's a lot of things probably going against GameStop, whereas Doge, it does have that meme power, but most importantly, it is a cryptocurrency. It is decentralized. It is a better opportunity, in my opinion, than GME, although I don't like either of them at the current time. Again, that's not financial advice. That's just my opinion on which one I think I would rather have at the moment if I was pretty much forced into a position. Now, let's get away from GameStop. I want to take a look at a couple of other currencies that we were taking a look at. Most importantly, basic attention token. This is the one I've gotten into and I was pretty high on for the longest time. I have accumulated over this period of time. My average entry price was around 18 to 20 cents. I did a pretty good job of averaging in on this particular token. I have enjoyed the last few weeks, and I think the trend is just getting started, moving up versus the dollar for basic attention token. Now, what is a bit concerning is its performance versus Bitcoin. You can see very, very much struggled as Bitcoin broke its all-time highs. And this is pretty common against a bunch of altcoins, but basic attention token really had a hard time versus Bitcoin. And what you might see if we are going to start an alt cycle and basic attention token is going to actually surge in value, you're going to have to see it come back up here to these relative levels. Now, if Bitcoin was to say the same price at this particular moment, and we were going to come back up to this yellow line here in the future, Bitcoin, let's just say it's 50,000, so it's a little bit easier. That is, where are we at? 958. So 2.2. So that's what, 1.5 times the current price. It puts the token at nearly $1. So even though it's struggling versus Bitcoin, and you would much rather be able to see it excel and get back up to these points versus Bitcoin and take some profits into Bitcoin, you're probably going to be pretty pleased with the dollar performance if it can just get back up to its previous levels. And hopefully in the future, we can outperform those as people start looking into alternatives. Now, let's take a look also at BNB. This is one I don't take a look at a lot, but it has always been one of my favorite. I don't talk about buying into it because I've gotten a bunch of referrals through Binance US, which if you're interested in joining Binance US, you might as well use my referral. It's in the description of the video. You can check that out. It's helped me save a lot on fees through Binance versus Coinbase and some of the other exchanges. I prefer its API and some other things, but it's really been very easy. I'm more of a fan of Binance than I am Coinbase, so I went that way. But anyway, I do have a few BNB, and I'm very pleased. You can see it is starting a very big move up. We're up to $107, and it traded as low as, $6 in March of last year. Hard to believe. Yeah, $6.50 back in March of last year, and it's 107. So you've gotten, 17, 18 times move up. That's very good. Let's go ahead and take a look at this on the daily, though. It's probably going to paint a little bit better picture of what's going on. You do have this big move up. Everything, it's been holding very well versus all of its moving averages. Everything is looking really great. And if you don't know, BNB has a burn program, which means they destroy their tokens periodically, which has been one of the most attractive things about BNB from a speculative standpoint. If you like Bitcoin and the fact that there are only 21 million Bitcoin to be minted ever, the fact that BNB reduces its supply, it doesn't even just stay at a fixed level, it actually reduces its effective supply over time. That alone makes your assets more valuable. It's like, well, I don't want to really use an analogy here, but you get the picture. They're taking these things out of the market and just destroying them. Not to mention, BNB actually does have a lot of utility with their exchange, mainly with reducing fees. You can reduce your fees on Binance US as well by using BNB to pay for your fees. I don't do a lot of trading, period, on Binance US, mostly because their books are a little wide. There's a lot of margin in between them. But if I did, I'd be able to save quite a bit on my fees using BNB. So BNB is probably by far one of my favorite tokens. They are probably, well, I'm pretty sure they are the biggest exchange, period, globally for crypto. Very good crypto values as well. CZ, a lot of people don't like him, but he is in the right state of mind when it comes to the crypto values, whereas Coinbase, not so much. That's why I switched. But that is all good for now. I did want to take a look at BNB versus Bitcoin, just to kind of get an idea where it is. And you can see it has gotten back up to these somewhat average levels over the last few years. And if it can move up and break its all-time high, you could easily see BNB $300-400 if it can get back up to its previous all-time high. If it can break that, you're looking at maybe even up to $1,000 eventually. That sounds silly, but if it does break those all-time highs, I do think that's a possibility. Is it going to do that? I have no idea. But just getting back up to the previous all-time highs versus Bitcoin would put it at several $100s at this time. Not just the 100 it is now, but several $100. Pretty impressive for a BNB token there. Now, let's see, there was a couple more. I did do a lot of talking about Link. Oh, wait. I did talk about Link. I actually wanted to take a look at Matic. This is one of my favorite pickups of the last year or so. This is one that I said that I was going to be buying in on. The trend looked very bullish. Higher highs, higher lows over a period of time there. It kind of faltered back here, but I'm glad I continued buying in on it. It has increased in price dramatically. It's broken all-time highs. This is an ETH layer 2 or an Ethereum layer 2. Sorry if I mispronounced that to your liking, but an Ethereum layer 2 solution. And I think a lot of people, as the hype cycle increases on Ethereum, are going to want to look into a layer 2 solution because Ethereum 2.0 isn't going to be ready for a while. And that was my theory on buying in and accumulating on Matic. Since it is a layer 2 solution, I figured once the network got super congested during the next bull cycle, people would really want to look for the layer 2 solutions. So that one has worked out very well and continues to work out very well. Take a look and see how it's performing versus Bitcoin. I do want to see if it is perhaps trading at all-time highs. It is not trading at all-time highs. If it can get back up to its all-time highs, let's see, we're looking at another 50% on top of where it is right now. So I don't remember what the actual USD price is. I think it was around 10 cents. So maybe around 15 cents, which is a huge move. But you are kind of facing some resistance right here. It's pretty obvious when you look at the price line going across the chart. Let's take a look at Link. Continues to perform phenomenally. I wish I had gotten into it earlier, but I did start buying in after its parabolic run-up kind of came to an end. I've been accumulating since then, and I think I'm going to continue to. It's a very solid project. It's hard to believe it ever traded that cheap, but definitely very solid in my opinion. Take a look how it's performing versus Bitcoin, but also we're going to take a look at it versus Ethereum as well. So versus Bitcoin, Link is actually kind of at an area of support. It's kind of scary if you think about it, because you think Link's prices went crazy now. Just wait and see if it holds support versus Bitcoin. It's going to be pretty wild. Let's take a look at it versus Ethereum, because it held up very well versus Ethereum for a very long time. This is a somewhat similar position. You can see it's holding support back here. It still has support there, and if it can continue to gain versus Ethereum, it's going to be very impressive, because I think Ethereum is going to continue to gain versus the dollar. So that means that Link is going to outperform Ethereum versus the dollar over time, which means the price could get kind of wild on Link if you think about it like that. Of course, this is all kind of dependent on how long this sort of crypto bull cycle lasts. Hopefully, throughout most of this year, my theory is that it's going to end sometime in the early fall. People are going to think it's going to end in December. It always ends in December. It's going to come a little bit earlier. I think everything is happening a little bit sooner than it did before, such as the beginning of the bull market breaking out of the bear market, like officially. I think all that happened a little bit sooner than it did before. That new all-time highs a little bit sooner than before. I think the cycle will end a little bit sooner than before. All right, one last one I take a look at is Uni, which is one that I'm also a big fan of. I started building a position in Uni not too long after the price dropped from its initial airdrop. I believe I started buying in around this point in time, and I've been buying every 2 weeks since then on my actual paycheck. Just putting more and more into Uni. Such a good project in my opinion, and it held this kind of area of support a few times and it broke out. It's very impressive. And let's take a look at it on the weekly. There's not a lot of history here, but you can see we are very high on the RSI though. There's that potential it comes back down to the weekly band and kind of test those previous highs back here. But overall, I'm a pretty big fan of Uni as far as long term. And I think once Ethereum Layer 2 actually gets implemented, something like Uni, it may not actually be Uni by the time it rolls around. It's going to be very big and very popular. Once people stop having to pay so much damn gas on their Ethereum transaction, everything's going to be great. That's going to take a while to get there. And speaking of other things that I'm looking into, if you haven't already, look at NBA Top Shot. This is an NFT platform based on the Flow blockchain. It's pretty cool. I've made quite a bit of money just buying packs on there. Now it's gotten to where it's crazy. So you might not be able to even get new items, but yeah, it's pretty interesting. But I'm going to cut the video off for now. My throat is getting very tired of talking. This has been a very long video for me, mainly because I haven't gotten to talk to you all about any sort of TA in the longest time, and specifically about the projects that I'm interested in. And again, if you want to keep up with any of the TA that I post between my videos, please follow me on Twitter. That is by far your best way to get that sort of information. But that's going to be it for now. I appreciate all of you all watching. Definitely took a lot of willpower to sit through me talking for this long, and hopefully if you did that, you actually liked the video, and you can actually go down on YouTube below the video and leave a like. And of course, while you're down there, please go ahead and subscribe. You can get other videos like this and more updates on Pine, and also tutorials in the future whenever they make changes. But that's going to do it for now. Thanks everyone. I hope you all have a great day.